Think about the last time a stranger smiled at you, maybe on the street, maybe in a lift, maybe at a store. And for just one fraction of a second, before you smiled back, something inside you hesitated. You did not know why. You just felt it. A tiny invisible wall going up. You are not rude. You are not unfriendly. You are not a bad person. But your brain, in that exact moment, ran a calculation so fast you did not even notice it. Friend or threat? Safe or dangerous? Us or them? And here is the thing nobody tells you. That calculation is not modern. It is not about culture. It is not about how you were raised. That calculation is 100,000 years old. And it was built on blood. Because there was a specific moment in human history when our ancestors stopped trusting strangers completely. A moment so violent, so devastating, that it rewired the human brain forever. And once you understand what happened, you will never look at a stranger the same way again. To understand why ancient humans stopped trusting strangers, you first have to understand something surprising. They did not always distrust them. In the earliest chapters of human history, around 200,000 years ago, small tribes of humans moved constantly across the African landscape. They were nomadic. They followed food. They followed water. They followed the seasons. And when two tribes accidentally crossed paths, the encounter was not always violent. Researchers who study early hunter-gatherer societies have found strong evidence that early humans sometimes traded with neighboring groups. They shared tools. They exchanged food. In some cases they even intermarried, mixing genetics between tribes in ways that strengthened both groups. The Jikung people of southern Africa, one of the oldest continuous human cultures on Earth, still practice a tradition called hexero. It is a system of gift-giving between neighboring groups. Walking miles to deliver small offerings to strangers. Building relationships across tribal lines. Researchers believe this tradition stretches back tens of thousands of years. So the question is not why humans distrusted strangers. The question is, what happened to turn cooperation into fear? The answer is a massacre. In 2016, archaeologists excavating a dry lake bed in Kenya made a discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about prehistoric human behavior. At a place called Nadaruk, near Lake Turkana, they found the skeletal remains of 27 people. Men, women, and children. They had not been buried. Their bodies were simply left where they fell. When researchers examined the bones, the findings were horrifying. Fractured skulls. Broken bones. Stone projectile tips still embedded in the skull and chest of two of the males. Evidence of blows from clubs. Evidence of hands and feet being bound before death. This was not a hunting accident. This was not a natural disaster. This was a massacre. One group of humans had systematically hunted down and killed another group, including the children. The date of the killing was approximately 10,000 years ago. And researchers at Cambridge University called it the earliest scientifically confirmed evidence of organized intergroup violence among hunter-gatherers. But here is what made this finding so significant. This was not a group that had settled down. These were not farmers fighting over land. These were nomadic hunter-gatherers. People who had no permanent territory, no crops to protect, no walls to defend. They were attacked simply because they were not the same group. And this was not the only time it happened. Nadaruk was not an isolated event. It was a pattern. Archaeological evidence from across the ancient world tells the same story. Skulls with blunt force trauma. Bodies with spear tips still lodged in bone. Sites of mass killing with no burial, no ceremony, just bodies left in the open. And the targets were almost always the same. Outsiders. People from a different group. Researchers who study prehistoric warfare describe it as small-scale but intense. Guerrilla-style raids and ambushes. Quick violent encounters between groups. Not large organized armies but something even more dangerous. Small coordinated attacks against unprepared victims. And who were the most common victims? The weakest members of the outsider group. Women carrying children. Elderly members who could not run. Young men caught alone away from the main group. The message being sent by the attackers was always the same. You do not belong here. You are not us. And that alone is reason enough. Humans and Neanderthals, who lived alongside each other for over 100,000 years, show identical patterns of skull trauma and broken arm bones, injuries consistent with a people engaged in repeated intergroup conflict. The violence was not occasional. It was constant. It was normal. It was survival. Here is where the story becomes personal. Here is where it becomes about you. After thousands of generations of intergroup violence, the human brain did not stay the same. It adapted. It changed in a very specific and very permanent way. Stanford professor Robert Sapolsky, one of the world's leading experts in human behavior, describes what happens in the brain when we encounter someone we perceive as an outsider. Within milliseconds of seeing an unfamiliar face, the amygdala fires. That is the ancient threat detection center of the brain. It sends one instant message throughout the entire nervous system. Unknown. Potential threat. Assess immediately. This reaction happens before conscious thought, before empathy, before reason, before you can even decide how you want to feel. And research confirms this bias goes deep. In studies measuring the brain's response to seeing someone in pain, humans show a measurably stronger response to the suffering of someone from their own group compared to someone from an outside group. The brain literally cares less about an outsider's pain. Not because people are cruel, but because the ancient brain was not wired for universal empathy. It was wired for tribal survival. The humans who trusted every stranger, the ones who walked up openly to any unknown group with no caution, frequently did not survive long enough to have children. The humans who hesitated, who felt that invisible wall go up, who assessed the stranger before welcoming them, those humans lived. And they passed that hesitation on to you. But here is something that makes this even more fascinating. Violence was not the only reason ancient humans learned to distrust strangers. There was a second threat that was invisible. Silent. And in many ways far more deadly. Disease. When two isolated groups of humans had been separated for generations, they had each developed immunity to the diseases circulating within their own group. But when they came into contact with strangers, they encountered entirely new diseases their immune systems had never seen. Researchers call this the disease avoidance theory of xenophobia, and the evidence is striking. The brain's disease avoidance system, which evolved to detect contamination and illness, is remarkably sensitive to anything unfamiliar. Different appearance. Different smell. Different accent. Different behavior. All of these differences, researchers say, can trigger a mild but automatic disgust response in the brain. Not because the stranger is actually dangerous, but because unfamiliar patterns historically correlated with disease exposure. The brain evolved to make false positive errors. It preferred to treat a safe stranger as potentially dangerous rather than risk the opposite mistake. Because the opposite mistake could wipe out an entire tribe. So here is the part of the story nobody tells you. We spent most of this video explaining why ancient humans stopped trusting strangers. The violence. The massacres. The disease. The tribal brain wiring. And all of it is real. All of it is scientifically documented. But here is what is also true. Humans are the only species in the animal world capable of choosing to override that ancient distrust. Completely. Deliberately. Permanently. Every other primate shows similar patterns of intergroup hostility. Chimpanzees raid and kill neighboring groups. Bonobos show in-group bias. Even some social insects attack foreign colonies on sight. But humans. Humans built the United Nations. Humans donate to strangers in countries they will never visit. Humans risk their lives for people they have never met and will never see again. The same species that massacred 27 people at Natarek 10,000 years ago also built hospitals for strangers. Schools for strangers. Entire systems of law designed to protect strangers equally. Researchers who study early hunter-gatherer societies have found that humans have, throughout history, alternated between hostility and extraordinary cooperation with outsiders depending on circumstances. The brain that fears the stranger is the same brain that can choose to trust them anyway. The question is never whether the ancient distrust exists. It does. You felt it the last time a stranger smiled at you. The question is, Which part of your brain are you going to let make the decision? The next time you feel that invisible wall go up around a stranger, do not judge yourself for it. It is 100,000 years old. It kept your ancestors alive through some of the most violent chapters in human history. But also remember this. The most remarkable thing about the human brain is not that it learned to fear strangers. It is that it learned to choose not to. If this video changed the way you think about something you feel every single day, share it with one person who needs to hear it. And if you want to understand more about the hidden science behind the way your brain was built, subscribe. Because there is a lot more where this came from.